Wish you could just screw the rules and just keep restanding your Vanguard over and over again until your opponent was dead? Or do you want it to stack your entire deck so that you know what you're going to draw check and damage check, but you didn't want to be labeled a cheater? Well, starting today, if you play one of these two decks, it's now officially legal.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we got two more clan reveals for the upcoming V-Clan collection set. Today we're going to tackle the reveals for Genesis as well as Nova Grappler. So we've got some more soul and deck manipulation as well as the reintroduction of the Raizers. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into these cards because the intro speaks for itself. These reveals are kind of nutty because they change somewhat the rules, or at least how we perceive that things were of the natural order within the game of Vanguard. So we're gonna start off with Genesis, and Genesis starts off with a relatively mild grade 1 in the likes of Witch of Orange's Valencia. And Valencia has the effect, although when this card is put into your drop from Soul during your main phase, aka being Soul Blasted, or some type of card that puts them into the drop zone, cost, bind this card, choose 2 cards from your drop, put a card from among them into your soul, and put a card from among them on the bottom of your deck. Now this is actually a very good generic skill because it increases your soul count for free. If you soul blast this card, you put a card back into the soul, so that's +1 in your total soul count that you had that turn, but at the same time you can put a trigger back into your deck. Now that's generically just overall good, but in a deck something like Fenrir, this is actually really good because not only will you put a specific card back into your soul, which then can be superior called out with Fenrir if you soul blast it, but at the same time you can load up your deck not only with triggers, but also with potential search targets for Fenrir, and for Fenrir you can tutor the entire deck. So this opens up more lines of plays for whatever Genesis deck you're going to play. So I like this effect already quite a lot. But it has another effect which makes it even better, which is Auto Rigor Trickle. At the end of the battle this unit boosted, cost, put 2 rear guards in the same column as this unit into your soul and draw a card. Now this is very similar to what we've seen with the Tamburino for the Orphis deck, where you basically stack the entire column for a draw. This is the same thing for the draw, but now you put those units into the soul, and that's a +2 on your soul, and that's going to be great for Genesis, but more importantly, that then also will then play directly into her first ability. So I like this card a lot. If you don't soul charge her, you can just call her from your hand to the field and just put her into the soul that way. So you're going to always generate value and there's no RNG involved with this, which is always going to be good. Now, if we move up to the grade 2, we've got Witch of Raven's Chamomile, and Chamomile has the effect, although from soul, at the start of your battle phase, if you soul blast a total of 3 or more cards this turn, you may call this card to the Vanguard circle. So the original iteration of this card allowed you to multi-attack. This doesn't allow you to multi-attack per se, but at the very least it allows you to flood the board at all times, so you can have at least 3 attacks every single time. And as seen as that Valencia puts an entire column into the soul, this allows you to then repopulate the board next turn to not minus yourself a bit too hard, which is actually really great. And at the same time, this can also just repopulate the column where you're going to call it Valencia in the first place, and that means that draw isn't a way to negate the -2, it's actually just a cycle at that point because you generated Chamomile for free. So that's actually really good, and we have enough ways to just soul blast preemptively in the main phase to facilitate this card, so this is a very good generic effect. But then she also has the effect, Auto Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of the battle. At the end of the battle, retire this unit. This effect is mandatory, so she can become a solid 20k attacker. Now, herself being retired might be awkward because, as stated, this is a mandatory effect. You cannot say, I'm not gonna resolve it. But there are ways that Genesis can benefit from this. A good example is that Fenrir is able to multi-attack, so even if she retires herself, you can call something now to the new openly open circle, so you can benefit through that. But with Valencia being able to just put the entire column into the soul, you can just put her into the soul preemptively before you're going to resolve the retire aspect of this skill, because both of them are going to be standby at the same time, and then you already put her into the soul, and now you cannot retire her because she isn't a unit anymore that can be retired in the first place. So there are definitely ways how you can circumvent the downside of this card, which is actually really interesting because it showcases how you can combo these cards together to actually negate their negative side but increase on their upsides. So I like this card a lot. It opens up a lot of interactions, and I can definitely see this card being run in various builds. But the most interesting card for Genesis is the new Grade 3 Goddess of Good Luck Fortuna. And interesting enough, this card has nothing to do with good luck because you're rigging the system to your own will. Because she has the effect, act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost Counter Blast 1, and Soul Blast 1 or more cards. So you can Soul Blast how much you like. Look at the cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of Soul Blasts for this cost, and put them on the top of your deck in any order. You can just stack the deck, and Genesis has a lot of ways to just soul charge a crap ton of cards, and then you just can soul blast maybe 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15, 20, whatever you like, and just look at your entire deck, stack them all the way that you want, and now you can set up all your drive checks, your damage checks, your draws, your future soul charges. Basically, you unlock Psycholia if you resolve this effect. This is really good. It doesn't generate you immediate value, but it's going to give you a lot. Like, Tsukiyomi was one thing. This is easier at Tsukiyomi because you don't have to remember all the different stacks you're going to do over the course of multiple turns. You're just going to look into your deck and say, okay, this is what I want here, this is what I want there, and this I want somewhere in between. I like this skill because it opens up so many different ways how you can interact with this. You, as a stat, you can just use it offensively for your drive checks. You can use it defensively for your defensive checks, like setting your heal triggers in premium, setting your over trigger at the right time. Like, these type of things allows you to do all these type of stuff. But it seems there are a lot of cards within Genesis, draw you card or setup cards or soldiers mid battle. You can also account for that as well and basically have the perfect game the moment that you can stack enough cards and effectively see the rest of the game play out in front of you. This skill in the right hands is deadly. And that comes from a Demiurge player. Do not underestimate a skill like this. This is ridiculous. But this isn't everything. Because she can even facilitate her own skill, meaning we can run other cards that do more than just soul charging. As she has the effect Auto and Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks, choose any number of rear guards and soul charge 1 for each unit chosen. So she can help you to just set up the soul that you're going to need to be able to facilitate her act ability. Now that means it is going to be a bit slower, because if you're going to rely on this a bit, that means you cannot use it immediately the same turn that you're going to ride her. But at the very least, it also allows you, if you don't want to stack your deck in one go, you can just look at the top 4 or 5 cards, you attack with her, you soul charge all the cards, and then you're gonna stack the deck again the following turn because you just keep generating more soul. It allows you to play into all those scenarios. So it opens up for different things, and at the same time, if your opponent's gonna do something weird, you just build up more soul so you can maybe adjust your game plan that you had set up and then change the deck a bit because you need to adjust it a little bit. It's flexible, it's strong, I like it. But then, it's even better because she also has the effect on a Vanguard Circle once a turn. When your damage check reveals a trigger unit, get an imaginary gift force. Just for free! Like, why? It didn't need to have this, but it does. It's ridiculous. Like, now just healing? It's going to be even better. Like, I like this a lot. Like, I've probably said it many times before. I like this skill a lot, and there isn't directly any combos or things that I can tell you how you can use the skill, because this has all to do with that you can manipulate your entire deck. That goes beyond anything that we're used to in Vanguard. And with triggers being a thing and all that kinds of stuff, this can be deadly. But at the same time, it needs rear guards or units that can pressure a little bit to at least give something behind the fact that you can manipulate the deck. But just knowing when triggers are going to hit or knowing what your top decks are going to be and whatever in itself is already kind of ridiculous. And because you can stack your deck in this kind of way, you can also just make your deck an entire toolbox, because you can make sure that you're going to hit those specific 1-offs or 2-offs that you're going to need to win the game. That's pretty good. So yeah, I like this card a lot, and seeing as that Genesis has this stride in premium that allows you to stride mid-battle, makes this card kind of ridiculous because you can actually rely on her act ability to just manipulate the deck in its entirety. If they're ever gonna hit the stand loops in Genesis, I think Fortuna is going to be the next big thing for Genesis in premium. I'm pretty sure about that. But Genesis isn't the only clan that got reveals. We also got some Nova Grappler reveals, and I'm gonna be straightforward with you guys. These reveals has left the community kind of scratching their head because they don't really make a lot of sense. I mean, they do, but also not really, as they're really weird how they try to make them work. But you understand it once we see them. As we first got this grade 1, Raptoria Raizer, and Raptoria Raizer has the effect, although when units placed on the Vanguard circle, choose a Battle Raizer from your soul and you may call to the Rearguard circle. Battle Raizer is just the starter, so you're always going to be able to resolve this. This is a +1 for a Soul Blast. I honestly like it because it opens up an interesting play with second ability, which is auto rearguard circle. Once a turn, cast counterblast 1 and put a rearguard in your soul. Search your deck for up to 1 card with Raizer in its card name and the same grade +1 as the card put into your soul for the cost. Call to the rearguard circle and shuffle your deck. So this Raizer is basically your search engine for the Raizer archetype. Now overall, the Raizers themselves aren't the strongest of units. Most of them are kind of underwhelming or kind of awkward. I think the grade 3 that just gets an extra 10k power is pretty decent. The new grade 2 that we have is going to be pretty good. The new grade 3 doesn't really do anything on rearguard circle. And we have a restander and maybe a power gainer and that kind of stuff. But at the very least, it's a searcher for the archetype, which is great. But what I really like about this is that you can call out Battle Raizer, and then with another copy of this card, you can put that Battle Raizer into the soul and get a new grade 1 on the board. That effectively turns that counterblast 1 in an actual plus, because you didn't waste any resource to get the Battle Raizer onto the field in the first place. But that then also synergizes actually really nicely with high-powered custom Raizer, which also has the effect once it's placed in the field to call out a Battle Raizer. So if you already wrote this card, Battle Raizer is already out of your soul. So there's no good way to then benefit of high-powered custom Raizer. Well, with this effect, just being able to put that Battle Raizer back into the soul, get a grade 1 onto the field, and then being able to call down a high-powered custom Raizer to once again call the Battle Raizer out of the soul, it allows you to create this weird type of plus engine that also allows you to flood the board, which I don't know if it's going to be good, but it's an interesting thing to mention because maybe this was one of the direction they want to take the Raizer deck into with the new support. But the main thing is going to be the new grade 2 and the grade 3, and for the grade 2, we've got Ultimate Raizer Dual Flare, and Dual Flare has the effect continuous of Vanguard circle, rearguard circle. During your turn, if you have no front row rearguards at stand, so your Vanguard doesn't matter in this instance, this unit gets power plus 3k for each grade of your opponent's Vanguard. So that means on turn 2, if your opponent is a grade 1, it's going to be a 12k attacker. That doesn't really mean anything. If your opponent is at grade 2, it's going to be a 15k attacker. That does mean something, because if you're up against a force deck, you still hit a magic number because it's 15 against 10. And if they are grade 3 as a force deck, but then this card is going to get plus 9k. But let's keep in that thought. If you put an 8k booster behind it, it's a 23k column. And anybody that's playing Overdress right now knows how good a 23k column actually is. But if your opponent is in grade 3, it's going to get a plus 9k, making it into an 18k beater, which is still a magic number against a 13k force base unit. So this card doesn't hit high, but it hits magic numbers, which is great because you don't have to dedicate a booster behind it. And if it's on an Excel circle, then during those turns, it's not a 18k, but it's going to be a 23k, so it hits over defensive trigger. So it's not the most amazing power gain, but it's free and it works. But then it also has the effect, auto rearguard circle. At the end of the battle this unit attacked, cost, put this unit into your soul. Choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets power plus 5k until the end of your turn. If your damage zone has no face-up cards, counter charge 1. This effect is actually really interesting, because for a minus on the field from a rearguard, which is basically a 5k interceptor, you create 5k on your Vanguard, and you get a soul and potentially a counter charge. That's not that bad, because Battle Raizers use a lot of these resources for either restanding, more resources, power gain, or just the Vanguard ability in general. So having a card like this that just fuels the engine is great, because on top of it, it going to the soul also synergizes very nicely with what the deck wants to do, because we have Cat Butler, which uses soul and it's going to come up. And we also have another effect which benefits this deck as well. That card being the new main grade 3 for Raizers, which is Ultimate Raizer Mega Flare. And Mega Flare has the effect, and this is the main reason why a lot of people are stumped about it, is auto Vanguard circle. At the end of the battle, your rearguard with Raizer in its card name attacked, cost, counterblast 2, and rest this unit, yes we're resting the Vanguard, and stand that unit and this unit. So we rest our Vanguard to immediately restand the Vanguard, but we also restand the rearguard. So effectively what we're actually doing here is that we can restand our rearguard for 2 counterblasts, but we can only do that if we did not attack with the Vanguard in the first place. That means we cannot stack triggers on that unit, which is kind of annoying, and counterblast 2 to restand the rearguard, that specifically needs to be a Raizer, isn't good. So this skill in itself is actually really bad. And there is, so far as I'm aware, no card in Nova Grappler that benefits from the fact that your Vanguard is restanding. There isn't the rearguard that gains power or does something the moment your Vanguard reset. Maybe in Premium that's the case, this could be a Premium effect, but in V Premium or V Standard or whatever you want to call the format, there isn't anything that benefits this. What my suspicion is, what this effect is trying to do, is it is trying to force you to get to the scenario where all your counterblasts is face down. Because let's say, for example, you have 2 counterblasts face up, and you have the dual flare on the rearguard circle, you want to put it into the soul, you're not gonna get the counter charge. And honestly, you want to make sure you get that counter charge to actually make that card valuable, or at least make sure that the value you generate out of it is worth it. So this skill is actually a counterblast 1 to restand the rearguard, but at the same time will make sure that the countercharge part of your dual flare will go through. And then honestly, the skill is not that bad if you're gonna look at it like that. It's situational, but it can make sure that you get full bang for your buck from your skills. This is actually pretty decent if you can make that scenario happen. But its main thing isn't its second effect, which is auto Vanguard circle. At the end of the battle this unit attacked, if you have no front row rearguards at stand, cost, counterblast 1, choose a grade 2 card with Raizer in its card name from your soul and write it as stand. At the end of that turn, choose a grade 3 card with Raizer in its card name from your soul and write it as stand. So it is an Exculpate type of effect, where we had Exculpate that goes into Blaster Blade that can then restand, but then it is somewhat of a Chrono Jet stride effect where you go back into the grade 3. And this is actually really good, because it gives you a second Vanguard swing. Yes, this second Vanguard swing is weaker because it's a grade 2, but keep in mind, dual flare puts itself into the soul. So if we do this combo, dual flare is already in the soul, we can then write dual flare on top of mega flare, and then we can swing with dual flare, which then gives us that extra attack if our opponent's still at grade 2, because keep in mind, all these skills do not care what type of grade your Vanguard is. If you attack with dual flare at that point, it's going to be a 15k attacker. If it's against a grade 3, it's going to be 18k, which is still going to be solid. And we do not discard anything, so we get that extra drive check. So we start to draw into more cards here. That's also really good. We counterblast 1 for an extra attack, that's also a +1 because of the extra drive check. And then at the end of that attack, when we end our turn, we ride back into the Mega Flare, which gives us another Exel Circle, which is another +1 if we went for Exel 2. So for 1 Counterblast, we went +2, generated an extra Exel Circle, as well as generated an extra drive check, which pressure our opponents even further, while our opponent potentially is still at grade 2. That's actually really good. But it gets even crazier than that, because some smart people out there probably remember that Cat Butler is going to be reprinted in this set, and Cat Butler has the effect that if the Vanguard didn't hit, and it's grade 2, you can Soul Blast 1, retire the Cat Butler, and restand your Vanguard. It doesn't lose the drive check, so that's pluses. Or at least it cycles, but you're gonna ditch the Cat Butler, so I do not really mind for that. And it restands your Vanguard over and over and over again for every Cat Butler that you have, and if you hit triggers, those triggers will stack, stack, and stack. That can spiral out of control fast. And depending on the scenario, you can either do this early game, when you want to ramp up your opponent's damage as fast as possible if they do not hit a defense trigger, or you can save it for a final turn if your opponent's already at 5 damage, and you know they're going to have to guard every single attack, and that will mean that Cat Butler will activate every single time. And with the inherent pluses we're doing here, with the searches, the deck filtering, the extra drive checks, there might actually be a consistent engine here where you're going to eventually draw into a couple of copies of those Cat Butlers over the course of the game, especially with the extra Exel Circle draws as well. So on first glance, these Raizers look very weird, especially the Counterblast 2 skill. But once you put everything in perspective, it makes sense, and there is an actual game plan and strategy that they're trying to build here. Now, I'm not saying that these decks are going to be insane and it's going to be the next meta thing for Nova Grappler, But at the very least, I think it's an actual very solid strategy that has a good solidified game plan, and I'm very curious how far they can take it. Maybe we're gonna get more Raizer support in the future. Maybe there's something in Premium here as well, because we have this great one that searches the entire Raizer archetype, and there are more Raizers in Premium that may come up or not. So I'm very curious how far they can take it, and overall, I like this a lot. It's a high roll aspect to it. Nova Grappler in my eyes always been this high roll type of deck, and this Raizer variant feels very much like it. And for anybody that maybe wants to try something else that's very weird or wacky, with this extra superior riding that they're doing, if the game goes long enough, you can use this effect to go into a precise Raizer, or incise Raizer, that's the name, and you will have a surplus of Axle Circles. Then the following turn, you can counter +1 to restand 5, 6, 7 cards, depending on how long the game went on. That's pretty good. And you might think to yourself, how are you going to get that card into the soul because you need to ride it? You don't have to ride the card. You can use the grade 1 Raizer to put it into the soul. Yes, you're not going to get the search off because there's no grade 4, but you put it into the soul to set up for your Mega Flare, and then you can ride it into the end of the skill. Might be a thing. But that said, those were all the reveals that we got today. The reveals are pretty interesting, especially the Genesis one. Like, I couldn't really go into in-depth in the card because there's just too much to talk about. Deck stacking and complete deck manipulation is an insane skill that is very hard to attain in Vanguard. Either you need to fulfill a super restrictive and awkward condition in the form of Deus Ex Machina, Demiurge, or you need to have the brain capacity of a next level human being with Tsukiyomi. But now seeing it in the form of this is going to be accessible for just a normal Joe like you and me. This is going to be interesting. And then we got these Raizer cards, which on first glance just stumped the entire community as we didn't know what to think about it. But by looking at it in a different light, in a different perspective, I can somewhat see the resemblance of an actual cohesive strategy. Now, how good it is, we have to figure it out. I like it honestly. But I like a lot of janky stuff, so that doesn't mean anything. So we're going to have to figure out how good it actually is going to be. But with it said, I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think of these reveals. What do you think of these Genesis cards? Do you like the new effect for Fortuna? What do you think of the Raizers? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one!